The hall was silent. Rows of people sat still, listening to every word. Narendra, Modi spoke. He stood at the podium, confident and calm, his voice carrying stories of India's strength and dreams. Cameras flashed, phones recorded. The whole country watched. But then something unexpected happened. The large wooden doors at the back of the hall slowly opened. A quiet breeze swept in. A small, older woman stepped through. She wore a simple green sari. Her steps were careful, almost hesitant. She clutched her hands together, nervous but calm. No one knew who she was, at least not yet. Modi noticed her instantly. His voice faltered. One word hung in the air, unfinished. The room froze. Modi's eyes followed her as she walked slowly down the side aisle. For a moment, the Prime Minister of India stood completely still. Then, to everyone's surprise, he stepped away from the microphone. He walked down from the stage, toward her. A murmur spread through the crowd. Whispers filled the room. "Who is she?" someone asked softly. Modi reached the woman and folded his hands in front of her in a humble namaste. She smiled gently and nodded in return. "This," he said, his voice quiet but steady, "is Lakshmi Pichai." People looked around, confused. The name sounded familiar, and then a reporter whispered loudly, "She's Sundar Pichai's mother." Gasps filled the room. Lakshmi Pichai stood quietly, her back straight, her eyes warm. Modi turned back to the audience, his voice now deeper with emotion. "Today, I was supposed to speak about technology, growth, and future. But now, I must speak about something more powerful: humility." He looked at Lakshmi again. This woman raised a son who now leads one of the most powerful technology companies in the world. She did it not from wealth, not from privilege, but from a small town. She believed in hard work. She believed in kindness. She believed in education. She taught her children to dream, and one of those dreams now guides millions. The crowd listened, unmoving. Lakshmi tried to step back, but Modi gently held her hand. "You taught the world something," he said softly, "and today, we must learn from you." Reporters lowered their cameras. Security guards stopped scanning the crowd. Everyone in that room had changed. Not because of a speech, not because of a title, but because one mother walked into a hall, and the leader of a nation chose to pause for her. As Modi helped her to a seat, he continued speaking. But now his words were not just policy or vision, they were personal. They were about the power of parenting, of patience, and of women who never ask for attention, but shape the world in silence. That day, the story of a nation shifted, not with noise, but with quiet respect. Ending line. And that was the moment the entire room realized. Greatness often walks in softly, wearing a simple green sari. Lakshmi Pichai sat in the front row now, just a few feet from the podium. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her face was calm, but her eyes were full, not with pride, not with excitement, but with memories. Memories of old kitchens, quiet nights, worn textbooks, and a child who always asked too many questions. Modi returned to the microphone, but something had shifted. His usual strength was still in his voice, but now there was something else: gentleness. "Many of you have heard of Sundar Pichai," he began again. "You know him as the CEO of Google, as a leader in technology. But very few know the woman who taught him how to think, how to speak with respect, how to remain humble in a room full of giants." He turned to her. "Lakshmi ji, may I tell your story?" She gave a small nod, and so he did. He spoke of a time when the Pichai family lived in a two-room house in Chennai, how they didn't have a refrigerator, how Sundar and his brother shared a single cot, how Lakshmi woke before dawn every morning, cooked meals, helped with homework, and still found time to teach her sons the value of honesty. She used to walk to the market every day, Modi said, because they could not afford a scooter. She would carry vegetables in one hand and school books in the other. A hush fell over the room. When Sundar was young, Modi continued, he would sit by the window, and listened to his mother talk to neighbors. He learned how to speak kindly by watching her. He learned leadership by watching her solve problems at home, not by yelling, not by showing power, but by being patient, by listening. Lakshmi looked down, her eyes moist now. Modi's voice softened. There are thousands of women like Lakshmi ji across this country, women who raise future leaders without ever being seen. They don't ask for applause. They don't stand on stages. They carry entire generations on their backs, and they do it with silence. He paused and looked at the crowd. Double quotes today. He said, "We must remember that greatness does not come from fame. It grows quietly in small kitchens, in classrooms, in tired hands that keep giving, even when no one is watching." The hall was no longer filled with whispers, only emotion. A young student in the back wiped her tears. A retired teacher whispered, "Finally, someone sees us." Then, to everyone's surprise, Modi stepped down again. This time, he walked toward Lakshmi holding a small box. He opened it in front of her. Inside was a delicate brooch, shaped like a jasmine flower. "This is not an award," Modi said. "This is a thank you from a country that owes you more than it can say." Lakshmi took it, her fingers trembling. For the first time that day, she spoke. Her voice was soft but clear. "I only did what any mother would," she said. "I gave him love. I gave him hope. The rest, he found on his own." And yet, everyone in that hall knew the truth. Without her, there would be no Sundar Pichai. Without millions of women like her, there would be no future. Ending line. And as her words faded, the room remained still, because in her silence, they had heard the voice of a nation's soul. The next morning, the video had gone viral. News channels played the clip again and again. Modi stepping off the stage, folding his hands, and introducing Lakshmi Pichai to the world. Social media was flooded with comments, not about politics, not about technology, but about mothers, grandmothers, teachers, forgotten heroes. In a quiet office in California, Sundar Pichai sat in front of a screen, watching his mother receive the brooch. He did not smile. He did not cry. He just stared. Remembering. Memories came rushing in like a storm. He remembered sitting on the floor with a broken radio in his hands, his mother crouching beside him, pointing at the wires even though she didn't understand them. He remembered her saying, "If it can be made, it can be fixed. If it can be fixed, you can do it." He remembered the day he got into it. He came home with shaking hands and showed her the letter. She didn't scream. She just made him tea. Then she quietly sold her gold bangles. He never forgot that. Back in the hall, Modi had resumed his speech, but with a new tone. He invited young students to ask questions. One girl, barely 15, stood up and said, "Sir, my mother also wakes up before me, works hard, and never asks for anything. But we are still poor. Will the world ever see her too?" Modi looked at her for a long time. Then he said, "The world does not see quickly, but truth always finds light. And sometimes, it only takes one voice like yours to begin that change." Lakshmi listened quietly. She had always known the world was not fair. But moments like this reminded her that fairness did not always come from loud speeches. Sometimes it came from a quiet room, where truth was spoken softly. Across the globe, Sundar sent a message. It was short. "Thank you, Amma. The world finally knows." He didn't share it online. He didn't post it on any platform. He just typed it and saved it in his phone under her name. Meanwhile, a group of students in Mumbai started a campaign called Letters to Amma, where children wrote thank you notes to their mothers and posted them in local papers. The campaign spread like wildfire. Suddenly, small acts of love were being shared like news. A boy from a village in Rajasthan wrote, "My mother sold her blankets so I could buy a math book." A girl from Kerala said, "My Uma taught me English with torn newspapers." And then one letter stood out. It read, "Dear Uma, I know you are tired. I know your hands hurt. But you smile anyway. I will become someone you can be proud of. And one day, I will tell the world your name." That letter was signed by Arun P. Cheney, age 11. Lakshmi read it 3 times, then she folded it and placed it in her purse. That evening, as she sat by the window of her guest house, watching the sun go down, a reporter approached her. "Madame, how does it feel being honored in front of so many people?" She smiled gently. "Honor is not in what others give," she said. "It's in knowing you gave your best when no one was looking." The reporter didn't ask another question. Some answers don't need follow-ups, ending line, and as the sun dipped low, Lakshmi sat alone, holding a letter from a stranger's child, knowing her story had already sparked 1,000 more. The story was no longer just about Lakshmi Pichai. In towns and cities across India, people began to speak differently. They began to listen more. Children hugged their mothers tighter. Schools asked students to write essays, not about success, but about sacrifice. Sundar Pichai's old school principal stood outside the worn gates with a garland in his hands. Behind him were dozens of students holding signs that read, "Thank you, Amma." Lakshmi had returned home. She had not expected the crowd. She had not expected the cheers. She had not expected the tears from people she had never met. As she stepped out of the car, someone handed her a single marigold flower. "You taught us something," the principal said. "You taught us that we are seen." Lakshmi smiled softly. "I didn't teach. I only lived." In that moment, something quiet happened. She became not just a mother, not just Sundar's Oma. She became a symbol of every woman who had gone unseen, unheard, and still never stopped giving. On the same day, a teacher in Guwahati began a classroom project. Every child had to write 1 page about the woman who had helped them most. Some wrote about mothers. Some wrote about sisters. Some wrote about neighbors who had brought food when no one else did. And then one child asked, "Why don't we do this for fathers too?" The teacher smiled. "We will. But today, we're learning about the quiet kind of strength, the kind that never brags, never asks, and never stops." In New Delhi, Prime Minister Modi hosted a quiet roundtable. No cameras, no press, just 10 women from small villages. They were invited not to be honored, but to speak to, share what they needed, what they dreamed. One woman said, "We don't need statues. We need scholarships for our daughters." Modi nodded. "Done," he said. Soon, a new government scheme was launched. It didn't carry flashy names. It was called simply Shakti, meaning strength, and every poster had the same image, a mother's hand holding a lunchbox, with her child walking beside her. Lakshmi Pichai was asked if she wanted to be part of the campaign. She refused. "I've already had my moment," she said. "Now it's their turn." That evening, she sat on her old terrace in Chennai, the same spot where Sundar once fixed radios, where birds still landed on the cracked railing. She looked up at the sky and spoke quietly to the stars. "You made him strong," she whispered, thinking of her late husband. "I made him kind. Now the world has both." At that exact moment, Sundar video called her. She saw his face, tired but smiling. "Amma, do you know the whole office is talking about you?" She laughed. "Tell them I'm just a simple woman." "They already know," he said. "That's why they're inspired." He paused, then added, "You always said kindness is the only thing that travels without a passport. And now you're proof." She smiled. In villages, tea stalls, schools, and metro stations, people were no longer just talking about technology. They were talking about mothers. They were talking about unsung stories. They were asking, who are the Lakshmis around us? And have we thanked them yet? But the story did not fade. What began as a paused speech had now turned into a wave of reflection. A nation known for its noise had started to listen to the quiet ones. The steady ones, the ones who gave everything and asked for nothing. Lakshmi Pichai had returned to her quiet life in Chennai. She spent her mornings watering plants, her afternoons reading the newspaper slowly, and her evenings on the old swing in the veranda. Strangers passed by the gate just to glimpse her. Some left flowers, some left letters. All left changed. She never put up signs. She never hired guards, because Lakshmi never believed in walls, only in doors. And yet, her door remained open for those who came with respect. One morning, a small girl knocked. She was no older than 8. She stood holding a notebook in one hand and her mother's hand in the other. "Amma told me you're the reason her name is being said out loud," the girl said. Lakshmi knelt down. "No, Beta, your Uma is the reason. I just lit a lamp. She is the flame." The girl hugged her, and Lakshmi felt something shift again, not in the world, but inside her. For years, she had been content to walk behind her son. Now, without planning to, she had become a path for others, across the ocean. Sundar Pichai was invited to a global conference on leadership. People expected him to talk about AI coding, algorithms. Instead, he walked to the stage, held a single photograph in his hand, and said, "Before I speak about the future, I want to tell you about my past. This is my mother, Lakshmi Pichai. She had 2 sons, 1 salary, and 0 complaints." He paused. "She is why I learned to be curious. She is why I never gave up. She is why I never forgot that leadership without humility is nothing but noise." The audience rose, not for technology, but for truth. On that same day, back in India, Modi spoke in Parliament. He closed his notes and said, "We've spoken enough about progress. Now let's talk about purpose." He raised a brooch now, a symbol of Shakti, and said, "If we want to build a great nation, we must first honor those who built us." Lakshmi watched this on television. She smiled, and for the first time, she allowed herself to feel something she had always pushed aside: pride. Not for the fame, not for the speeches, but for the fact that her simple life had helped others believe their simple lives mattered too. That evening, she wrote a letter, just a small note. She did not send it. She folded it and kept it inside her old recipe book. It read, "To all the women who feel unseen, unheard, and forgotten, please know, the world may not notice right away, but one day, your story will sit on someone's lips, and when it does, the world will finally understand that love without conditions is the strongest power of all." Lakshmi passed quietly in her sleep 2 years later. There were no grand ceremonies, but in homes across India, families lit a small diya in her name, and Sundar, standing under a soft evening sky in California, whispered one word to the wind, "Amma." 3 months after Lakshmi Pichai passed, something unusual happened at the United Nations, during a global summit on education and empowerment. A young girl from India stood up during a youth segment. She was only 17. She wore a plain salwar kameez and spoke in soft English. "My name is Ananya," she said. "I come from a village near Kanchipuram. I am here today because of a woman who never knew me, never taught me, and never spoke to me but changed everything for me." Her name was Lakshmi Pichai. The hall fell silent. Ananya held up a small photo. It was a clipping from a local newspaper, showing Lakshmi holding a letter from a child. "I saw this image 3 years ago. That day, I stopped thinking I was invisible. I applied for a scholarship. I stood up to those who said girls shouldn't study science. Now I am here, studying robotics." She paused, holding back tears. "Lakshmi Amma made me believe that kindness is power, and now, I want to pass that belief forward." The crowd stood, not because the speech was loud, but because it was real. Word of her moment reached Sundar Pichai the same night. He watched it alone. His fingers gently touched the screen, and for the first time since his mother's passing, he cried but not out of sorrow. He cried because he finally understood something. His mother's story was no longer hers. It belonged to the world now. Months later, on his visit to India, Sundar did something unexpected. Instead of delivering a keynote in Delhi, he asked to visit his old neighborhood in Chennai. No cameras, no press, just him, his brother, and a bag filled with books. He walked to his childhood home. The walls were older. The swing creaked. The plants were overgrown, but the memories stood strong. He placed the bag of books on the doorstep and whispered, "For the next dreamer." Then he visited his mother's resting place. Under a neem tree, surrounded by jasmine, was a simple stone. No titles, no achievements, only 6 words. She raised one and inspired millions. He sat there for hours, talking, thanking. He told her about the letters he still received, about the girls now studying science, about the new Lakshmi scholarships being given in her name, and about a little girl named Ananya, who now wanted to start a school in her village. That evening, the sun dipped low, and Sundar stood up, feeling both heavy and light. He realized something. His mother's story never ended with her passing. It had simply become 1,000 beginnings. In tomes across India, women still whispered her name as hope. Teachers shared her story before exams. Girls wrote essays about her when asked, "Who is your hero?" And in the smallest village schools, a simple phrase was now written above chalkboards: "Be like but strong." No awards were ever needed, no monuments were ever built, because Lakshmi Pichai had already carved her name where it mattered most, in the hearts of people, and that is the highest honor any human could ever receive. 3 months after Lakshmi Pichai passed, something unusual happened at the United Nations. During a global summit on education and empowerment, a young girl from India stood up during a youth segment. She was only 17. She wore a plain salwar kameez and spoke in soft English. "My name is Ananya," she said. "I come from a village near Kanchipuram. I am here today because of a woman who never knew me, never taught me, and never spoke to me but changed everything for me. Her name was Lakshmi Pichai." The hall fell silent. Ananya held up a small photo. It was a clipping from a local newspaper, showing Lakshmi holding a letter from a child. "I saw this image 3 years ago. That day, I stopped thinking I was invisible. I applied for a scholarship. I stood up to those who said girls shouldn't study science. Now I am here, studying robotics." She paused, holding back tears. "Lakshmi made me believe that kindness is power, and now, I want to pass that belief forward." The crowd stood, not because the speech was loud, but because it was real. Word of her moment reached Sundar Pichai the same night. He watched it alone. His fingers gently touched the screen, and for the first time since his mother's passing, he cried, but not out of sorrow. He cried because he finally understood something. His mother's story was no longer hers. It belonged to the world now. Months later, on his visit to India, Sundar did something unexpected. Instead of delivering a keynote in Delhi, he asked to visit his old neighborhood in Chennai. No cameras, no press, just him, his brother, and a bag filled with books. He walked to his childhood home. The walls were older, the swing creaked, the plants were overgrown, but the memories stood strong. He placed the bag of books on the doorstep and whispered, "For the next dreamer." Then, he visited his mother's resting place. Under a neem tree, surrounded by jasmine, was a simple stone. No titles, no achievements, only 6 words. She raised one and inspired millions. He sat there for hours, talking, thanking. He told her about the letters he still received, about the girls now studying science, about the new Lakshmi scholarships being given in her name, and about a little girl named Ananya, who now wanted to start a school in her village. That evening, the sun dipped low, and Sundar stood up, feeling both heavy and light. He realized something. His mother's story never ended with her passing. It had simply become 1,000 beginnings. In homes across India, women still whispered her name as hope. Teachers shared her story before exams. Girls wrote essays about her when asked, "Who is your hero?" And in the smallest village schools, a simple phrase was now written above chalkboards. Be like Uma, but strong. No awards were ever needed. No monuments were ever built, because Lakshmi Pichai had already carved her name where it mattered most, in the hearts of people, and that is the highest honor any human could ever receive.